right, y'all. Welcome back to Anti-War Radio, Chaos 92.7 FM in Austin, Texas. I'm Scott Horton, and our next guest today is physicist James Gordon Prather. You can read all he writes at antiwar.com/Prather. He has served as a policy implementing official for national security-related technical matters in the Federal Energy Agency, the Energy Research and Development Administration, the Department of Energy, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and Department of the Army. He has also served as legislative assistant for national security affairs to U.S. Senator Henry Bellmon, Republican of Oklahoma, ranking member of the Senate Budget Committee and member of the Senate Energy Committee and Appropriations Committee. Prather had earlier worked as a physicist and nuclear weapons physicist at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California and Sandia National Laboratory in New Mexico. And while they mention the Army here, he was the chief scientist of the Army. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Prather.
Well, I'm glad to be back again, Scott.
Okay, so you're our in-house nuclear weapons expert and international treaty expert when it comes to the world's non-proliferation regime. And lucky me, I have tomorrow's Gordon Prather article in front of me here. And basically, you make the case that the Bush administration faced two problems in taking power. One was they had to figure out a way to justify multiple regime changes. And two, they wanted to get rid of the nuclear non-proliferation regime so that they could make it okay for them to use nuclear weapons on people in doing those regime changes. Is that it?
No, not quite.
I thought that's what I read there.
No, what I tried to say was when they came in with this plan of establishing an American hegemony, or is it?
Hegemony, I think they said.
Hegemony. Okay.
Empire.
They determined that about the only way that they could get Americans to go along with this establishment of this hegemony, or whatever the word is, well, let's call it the Fourth Reich or something like that.
Yeah, the empire.
Yeah, was to convince Americans that these regimes that existed at the time in the Middle East and in North Korea posed a threat to the average American. That was their problem. Then along came 9/11, which was even admitted by people like Paul Wolfowitz, was a heaven-sent opportunity. And okay, now what they could do is they could claim that there were these state sponsors of terrorism, North Korea and all along the axis of evil, and that these regimes constituted a threat to American citizens. That is, they were seeking nuclear weapons, and they would give them to terrorists, and therefore they would be a threat to the United States. The problem is that all of the nuclear programs in all of these states were subject to IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency safeguard agreements, which were required of them as signatories to the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Okay, now, let me stop you there just to sum this up real quick. We have this Non-Proliferation Treaty, which basically says if you're a nuclear weapons state and you're a signatory, you promise not to proliferate the nuclear weapons to anybody else. And if you're not a nuclear weapons state and you're a signatory, you promise not to attempt to develop nuclear weapons. And then the IAEA, this UN agency, their job, or part of their job, is to verify that these non-nuclear weapon states are, in fact, staying non-nuclear weapon states, right?
No, not quite. Again, Scott, what the Non-Proliferation Treaty does is, as you say, it says that the signatories who don't already have nuclear weapons promise not to acquire them by hook or crook or any other way. Mm-hmm. But there's no enforcement mechanism in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So what the Non-Proliferation Treaty does is require these signatories that don't already have nuclear weapons to place all of their nuclear programs, make them subject to a safeguards agreement with the IAEA. Now, these safeguard agreements already existed before there was ever a Non-Proliferation Treaty. And in the IAEA statute, it says that in the event that nuclear programs that are subjected to an IAEA safeguards agreement, if the inspectors discover that any of certain prescribed nuclear materials, basically it's weapons-grade uranium and plutonium, but there are some other things that are thrown in there too, says if any of these proscribed materials are diverted to a military purpose, the inspectors are to report to the IAEA board that this has happened, that some of these prescribed materials have been diverted to a military purpose, whereupon the IAEA board is to report to the Security Council that this has happened. Then the Security Council is supposed to, upon receiving such a report, is supposed to make a determination as to whether or not this reported diversion constitutes a threat to the peace in the region where this country is, okay? Mm-hmm. So that's the procedures that are set down in international law, okay?
So I could see how this would be a problem for the administration then if Iran, Iraq, and North Korea, the three members of the so-called Axis of Evil, are all members in good standing of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and all have safeguards agreements with the IAEA. That could make it difficult to accuse them of developing nuclear weapons and accuse them of possibly one day handing those nuclear weapons off to Osama.
You got it. So the whole structure was in the way. The procedures, the Non-Proliferation Treaty itself, which had no enforcement mechanism, the IAEA safeguards agreements, the IAEA and its reporting requirements, and the what is written into the UN Charter as to what should be done in the event that some signatory to a safeguards agreement diverts certain materials to a military purpose. Okay. And so that's what they set out to do. They set out with Iraq, which was clean as a whistle, no doubt about it. I mean, if there was any country in the world who was determined not to have a nuclear weapons program when Bush came into office, Bush 2, it was Iraq. My goodness gracious. I mean, by then it was 10 years that the IAEA had been going under a UN Security Council mandate, had been going everywhere and interviewing everybody. And, practically they were an occupying power.
Well, Gordon, one of the most famous Cheney quotes, one of the most famous Cheney lies in the lead up to war is when he told Tim Russert on Meet the Press, we believe he has in fact reconstituted nuclear weapons as though they had been constituted in the first place. And his next sentence was, well, I think that El Baradei, the director of the IAEA, is frankly wrong.
That's right. He did say that. And that was in August, as I recall, of 2002, the quote you're talking about. He made those kind of statements a lot of times. By the way, I sat up and was just fascinated to see Scott McClellan, former press secretary for President Bush, on Olbermann on Countdown last night. I hope you saw that.
No, I didn't. I'll have to find the YouTube.
Oh, gee, that was something else. I mean, it was almost the whole hour, the interview with him. And it was very pleasing to me that everything that he said, or he didn't say anything, McClellan didn't say anything that was at all inconsistent with the column I'd already submitted to you. I mean, he basically said what I repeat in my column, which was the revelation back in 2003, in the summer of 2003, about the time that the invasion of Iraq was beginning to not look such a cakewalk. Walter Pincus of the Washington Post revealed that a year before, that is in August of 2002, they had established this White House Iraq group that met in the Situation Room regularly. And it was done, basically, according according to McClellan and to Walter Pincus and all kinds of other people, the basic job it was of this White House Iraq group, which included Condi Rice, for example, and Scooter Libby, was to launch a propaganda campaign against the American people, which is, of course, illegal,